Many are predicting that the worst is yet to come, which is unfortunate, said one person here. Until now, they've enjoyed the reputation of being the nation's icebox.
Watched a burglar in his home this morning by webcam.
As a journalist of over 25 years, stories are what make my world turn.
Reporting live from the Dallas newsroom tonight, Jeff Crilley, Fox 4 News.
But in 2008, I took the jump from my familiar life and started a PR firm from my home.
We're talking about anyone with a camcorder like the one I'm using becomes a television network.
We started slowly growing the company, and we now have over 100 clients, and we've branched into the world of live digital broadcasting. I now own 8 different TV studios and have a huge team, and the stories that I now get to share are sometimes the most important of my life. Life has a funny way of coming around full circle. This is the Jeff Crilley Show.
Well, I have to tell you, my father, uncle, brother, all ministers, and as a preacher's kid, I know the church world very well, and I know that many of them are kind of stuck in the Stone Age, especially when it comes to technology, and they had to be dragged into the 90s during the pandemic, because if you couldn't stream, if you couldn't reach your congregant, you were out of business. So to talk about that today, Jeff Hook with help me with this.
Communitas Technologies.
And I'm the professional broadcaster, you know that. Communitas Technologies. We're going to tell you much more about your background in a minute. But my co-pilot today, Eric Moore, he's a former A&M star athlete, serial entrepreneur, and worked with Fox Sports. Thanks for being my co-pilot.
Yeah, long time ago. But it's a joy to be here between two Jeffs.
Oh, yeah, right? So I'll let you take the first question.
Yeah, well, Jeff, it is so good to see you again. You've done a lot of amazing things in your career. And you've got a great company that you're starting right now, Communitas. And tell us a little bit about your journey and what brought you to the point to where you are today.
Yeah, so like Jeff, I grew up a pastor's son in the Midwest, and wanted to get out of that little small town as quickly as I could. So I got into technologies. I was a programmer at Hallmark Cards, but then I got into consulting, so I learned how to solve problems. Then I got into corporate software with Oracle, i2 Technologies. And then God called me to bring some software to the church market. That was Fellowship One with Fellowship Technologies. We sold that to Active Network right before their IPO. And when my non-compete was up, I started Communitas Technology to take a platform approach to the faith industry. So it's not just about churches, it's about parachurches, other nonprofits, but more importantly, it's about helping the congregant, the person who goes to church, live a more functional Christian life, right? So let's squeeze the dysfunction out of their lives so that they can be better parents, better spouses, just better all around people.
And we found a great video on your website. Let's go ahead and roll that now.
A person's background, not just their basic demographics, but things like their family situation, where they work, issues they are dealing with, and their religious upbringing are all essential information that you should know so that you can do the best job of ministering to them to become their spiritual community. And unless your memory is as great as an elephant, shouldn't it be stored somewhere for your recall, as well as to share with other staff, like the church database, not someone else's individual inbox, or locked up in an Excel spreadsheet, or worse yet, somewhere on a social media platform that is here today and gone tomorrow? If your ministry is going to be part of writing a new chapter in their life, that first connection will become an inflection point in their life's journey, their story. To minister to a person, it is best to begin to understand who they are, what they are searching for, to better help your church offer what they may need. Timothy Keller, in his book, Center Church, refers to this as being able to give the gospel context to them. We call it personalized ministry.
Awesome. One of the things that I admire about you, Jeff, is a lot of people are searching for purpose, the intersection between purpose and what they do professionally. You seem to have met that intersection in a really powerful way. You've started a purpose-driven company that really has an opportunity to transform lives. Tell us a little bit about your business model, and you also use the term church beyond walls. What does that mean?
Right, so let's first go with the church beyond walls, right? Church beyond walls, for whatever reason, many different reasons,
the church has been started to be focused on Sundays, right? It's all about Sunday morning. Well, our lives are all about 7 days a week. And we have to do a mind shift and think that the church is not the building. The church is the people. And so how can we help the church, each other, live a better life 7 days a week? So beyond Sundays, beyond the church building, so the church is the people, right? As far as bringing purpose, I mean, we all have different purposes, right? And what I really like, based upon what I've been learning, is really, what's your identity? Who do you think you are? And many times, I like to say identity is the stories you tell yourself about yourself, right? Where your true identity is the stories that God tells himself about you, right? So, and many times those are very different, because we beat ourselves up sometimes about, we see our failures, where God sees us and just loves us. God is love. That's in the word, right? So how can you find your identity, your true identity, and out of that becomes your purpose? And you can decide what your purpose is. It might be based upon a certain role as a parent. It might be based upon a role as a child, even though you're an adult. It might be based upon a role as a brother or sister, right? So our identity is really multifaceted based upon the different roles we have. And then there is that marketplace ministry of living just a better life and showing other people love, right? If you look at the 2 great commandments, it's loving the Lord your God with everything you got, and then loving your neighbors yourself. And then that one that's forgotten called love your enemies. That's the really tough one.
That's tough.
I think you're a genius, Jeff, because the church business, if you will, has been in trouble for a while. We keep seeing numbers of the unchurched go up and up and up. And during the pandemic, unfortunately, so many people got out of the habit of being engaged with a church. And then along comes your technology. Can you speak to the trouble that the churches in general are facing?
Right, so you're absolutely right as far as numbers going down. However, I do believe we're still a very large Christian country, right? At least Judeo-Christian. That's what we were founded on in a lot of ways. So during the pandemic, though, life was pretty scary, right? I mean, people were shutting things down left and right, whether it's churches, whether it's shelter in place. It was a different world. So that's a pretty scary situation, but yet we still want to come together as community, as people. And so you can do that through technology. Now, a lot of people, I'll talk to a pastor and they'll say, oh, online church is not as good as being in-person church. That is true if you're looking at a streaming experience. The streaming experience is not as good as the in-person with the music and the sermon. You're seeing, he's seeing you, she's seeing you. But that's not, again, going back to the earlier comment, that's not what church is. Church is the community of people sharing their lives together, loving each other. And so some of that can be done, some of that connection can be done using technology. There are certain people who will consume some content online and they would never, ever be found stepping into a church, right? Because of maybe they were church burned. You know, that's a topic that is coming up more and more is, hey, I was burned for whatever reason when I was young or when I got divorced. They got church burned. And unfortunately, a lot of people look at church and then blame God when in fact they really are two different things, right? So I think if we're going to come together, then the church needs some community building tools that in this world are online tools using the iPhone, so that too often, we were talking about engagement before this, engagement should not just be the congregant or the person interacting with the church staff. Engagement is us interacting together and building each other up, helping each other with hope and faith, right? So one of the most underutilized assets that a church has is the network of their congregation. So why aren't we using technology to bring that network together and then to unleash that network into the rest of the world? So Oh, you're having this problem? Well, here's some content, Eric, that came from my church that maybe you ought to consume and look at. And it needs to be really short content because our attention span is now 8 seconds, right? It's compared to a goldfish. So it really needs to be shortened. And I was in a conversation the other day where somebody said, oh, the church has a lot of content. It has a lot of long form content, not the content that we're used to consuming on the internet.
We were talking earlier, Jeff, about, we talked a lot about your demographics, your audience that you're trying to reach. Talk to me a little bit about the pastors today. If I'm a young pastor wanting to get into ministry, or if I'm a pastor who's been in ministry a while, feeling frustrated.
Right.
Jeff mentioned the numbers are going down. Talk to me about how your tool and the philosophy of your company can be a resource and something to help those pastors see more clearly how they can expand or retain or be just more strategic in how they go about their ministry.
Right. So let's go back to thinking about a pastor that goes to seminary is being taught about the Bible, about Hebrew, about Greek, not about how to run a church. Really. They might have 1 or 2 classes, but I kind of equate them to doctors. They go learn about medicine. They don't know how to run a medical practice or a hospital or a lawyer. They learn about the law in law school, not how to run a law practice, right? So churches or pastors need to do some additional learnings on how do I actually run this organization. And so they're kind of tossed into the deep end. And that, if you're tossed into the deep end and told to swim, that can be a little jolting on you, right? So as we get into our technology though, because we're taking a platform approach, we've actually, and I'm going to get a technical term, we've abstracted the pastors out from their church so that they're in a layer all by themselves so that they can actually connect with other pastors so that we can someday create what I refer to as like a LinkedIn for pastors, so that the pastors from one church can be in community, in group with other pastors from other churches using our software and can actually help each other and lift each other up and teach each other. So that's how our software, by abstracting them out of the database into their own group, they can be beyond their church, right? We do the same things with congregants so that if all 3 of us went to different churches, we could still connect to each other's because we're on a layer of data all by itself. We're actually just logically connected to our church. Probably a little more technical than you wanted to get into.
It's good.
But that's the architecture of it.
It's really good.
So Jeff, us both being preachers' kids, we know the audience. Some of them are technophobes, and your solution might be exactly what they need. They just don't understand it. So are you getting any resistance at all from the marketplace?
So technology has to just be very, very simple to execute on, right? So you have to squeeze any kind of bugs out of the system. But because of the iPhone, technology is getting so simple anymore to actually operate. Very few people will say, oh, Facebook is hard to operate, right? And so it's just using some design, using some user experience, right? Capabilities, gamification, things like that make it fun, right? And so how can we do that? It's just, we're taking, instead of, we used to have probably less than 15 years ago, programmers design the UI UX. Now we have true designers design it to make it easy, right? So if we can actually take it to the next level and start to design experiences, online experiences, like the effort that the church takes to do Sunday morning experiences, I think we can start engaging people.
Eric?
I love it. I love it. I have a chance to speak to a lot of different business leaders in a variety of verticals. And it's amazing how common the challenges are. Listening to you is not unlike listening to someone in IT and other industries. And so I'm finding a lot of leaders are all faced with the same dynamic. You talk about the church of tomorrow. What does that church of tomorrow ultimately look like?
Well, that's a good question. We call it the future church, right?
Yes.
Church of the future. So the church of the future will have enough information that they can provide personalized ministry to the person about them and their journey, right? And how can we call it a dynamic journey-based curriculum. It's not a set curriculum for you. It's a dynamic curriculum based upon what's happening in your life. So if you just lost your parent, you might need a grieving class, right? With a grieving cohort, or people going through that same thing about grieving about a parent, which is different than, oh, you just lost a child and you need to grieve. But grieving for a child and grieving for a parent are two very different things. And we're working with an organization called Faith and Grief. And one of the things that we're discussing is, what about the daily grief that we have because something that we thought was true is no longer true? And we kind of get a little bummed out on a daily basis. That's a grieving process as well, that if we don't learn how to let that go, then it kind of just piles up on us, and then it becomes depression, right? And going back to, how can we help if your teen is having anxiety and depression? How can the church get you into an online class dealing with that, right? So there's so many things going on in this world. It's very complex. I like to say life is kind of simple, but it's complex, right? So it's not simple to, it's not hard, it's just complex. So does that make it clear?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Jeff, we're almost out of time. So final thoughts. What would you like to leave the audience with?
That's a very good question. I think the church of tomorrow can serve this culture so much better than the church of the past has. And just like a lot of industries are going through a digital transformation, the faith industry needs to go through that digital transformation as well. And digital transformation, as Mark Benhoff of Salesforce would say, starts and ends with the customer. And in this case, the customer / prospect / congregant is anybody, right? Just because you're not stepping into a church doesn't mean you're not a potential customer. Now, a lot of people in the church industry would say, oh, church is not a business. But there's some business attributes to church that the church could learn from. And so if we would understand that we can help some people deal with some of the rough spots within life, then maybe they'll be in a position to go, oh, tell me about your God. Tell me about your Son of God, so that we might actually fulfill the mission of the church as it was intended back in Acts.
Wow, this has been an amazing segment. We're going to have you back, Jeff, and Eric, thank you for being my co-pilot.
Yes.
We're going to end with a couple of websites. First, yours, Jeff, which is CommunitasTech.com, and then Eric, who's on the board of the Advanced Community Fund. That's advancedntx.org. Thank you both.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it for now. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.